It's time for All-22 film review with Bengals fans. We've got some good news, some bad news, and some good news. Let's break it down.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Liscow. Today I'm joined by Mike Santagata at Bengals_Sands on Twitter. Our weekly film review episode. It is time to put the first half of the season behind us, the disaster that ensued at Paul Brown Stadium on Sunday against the Cleveland Browns behind us. And, you know, everybody's being real negative right now, Mike, and I get it. On the one hand, you know, you don't want to go into the bye week playing the last 5 quarters of Bengals football that they've played. And it's really easy to go back to the Jets game and say, you know what, if they finish that play, they make one more play in that game, they're 6-3. You can make the same argument about penalties at the end of the game and the Jets game and the Bears game. And then you could even look at this Browns game and say, you know, if they had played better in that first quarter and they hadn't just given, as Zach Taylor told us, you know, 16 to 20 points to the Cleveland Browns to start the game, maybe we're singing a bit of a different tune right now. But all of that said, and turnovers aside, there were still some positives to take away from this game and plenty of problems. We'll talk about those too. Some of them are self-explanatory. So we're not going to get into Burrow's interceptions today because they're just bad throws. There's not a whole lot going on there, to be honest. You know, he misses his placement by a few feet. There weren't major protection busts in this game that require a lot of exploration or analysis. There's one play in particular on play action where Drew Sample just doesn't notice there's a corner blitz coming or they don't get it picked up right. And Myles Garrett did some things. We'll talk about the Myles Garrett matchup a little bit later. But again, I think the biggest positive to talk about in this game, outside of some individual performances that we're going to get to in segment 3, are that the scripted plays went really well for this team. The Bengals had 2 drives to start the game. The pick 6, obviously not the way you want to end the drive, but they essentially score 2 touchdowns. So they're at least knocking on the door. They scored 10 points, if not for the pick 6, on their first 2 drives. And I thought a lot of the yards, when I went back and looked, you have like a nice design on the flea flicker. You have some dragging concept a couple of times early where they're running flats and slants, taking advantage of pre-snap alignment, getting free yards. And I thought it was one of the better couple scripted play kind of openings we've seen from this team. And they just didn't all, you know, the pick 6 really threw things for a loop.
Yeah. And I remember I thought this was the best scripted play series that the Bengals had up until the sack, and that got called back, and then it's an interception for a touchdown, and then it's one of the worst because you gave points to the other team. But really looking at the process to get there, they did a really good job, and I thought they did a good job playing on their own tendencies too. One of the first plays of the game, they like to run Y juke, which is the play that they haven't run in a while, and this is the play that Burrow throws the interception in Green Bay in overtime. So I think that's part of the reason why they kind of stopped running it a little bit. But you run a slot fade, so you have a hitch from the most outside. Second guy inside is going to run a fade. And the Browns knew this was coming. And so Higgins starts going deep, sells the deep route. Troy Hill matches him, and then he curls it back inside and just wide open on that because Hill was fully expecting him to just keep running the slot fade. And he was on top of it, so he had it covered. Then you had the motion into 4x1 empty, throw the flat screen to Mixon. I thought that was a good design.
I love that one.
Yeah.
Because, and let me just interject real quick, because what you get pre-snap, when you have the motion, nobody goes with Mixon. You very clearly see you have 3/4, and it just sets up for a perfect screen. And if your wide receivers execute the blocks, which they did, then you have free yards. And there were some more examples of identifying easy matchups and free yards in those first couple drives too.
Yeah, I'd almost want to see what Stanley Morgan's blocking grade was because I thought he did a really good job in the game because there was another play, wind back, which is basically counter without a pooler, that he was the lead blocker on motion. He took his guy downfield and opened that one up too. So he had some good plays.
I've got it here for you. His run blocking
Okay.
grade, which I think includes the screen, I'm pretty sure they lumped these together, was by far the highest on the team. 86.1, which the next closest, Riley Reef, they actually thought he had a pretty nice game. 75 for him. So really positive remarks from PFF for Stanley Morgan. And the wineback play is a great example. And the screenplay, he also did a great job.
Yeah. He had the guy that was pressed up. That's why I'm thinking of him,
That's right.
because he took the guy that could actually blow up that play. The other two, I mean, even if they miss their blocks, Mixon has
You know,
time to do something.
he didn't even press. I'm looking at it right now. It was Denzel Ward, and he just triggers fastest. He gets
Oh, okay.
downhill immediately. So they're flat. All the corners are flat, but only one of them gets downhill. And I think maybe it's not Denzel Ward. Maybe it's 23. Maybe I'm
Yeah, it's
not
Troy
seeing the
Hill.
number
That's
right.
what I thought
Doesn't
it was.
Yeah, Troy Hill. That makes more sense to put on Morgan Stanley and the Stanley Morgan in the slot anyway. Anyway, he triggers downhill immediately and is going to blow it up if that isn't a really good block.
Yeah, I mean, this is all on the first drive. All these nice plays. They had a cross screen. Mixon makes a one-handed catch, probably unnecessarily, but gets upfield, makes a guy miss, runs hard. You get the flea flicker on the first drive of the game, and I mean, good design on that. I think that might be the same play that John Ross
Yeah.
way back scored on, because it's the jet motion to a wheel.
Mhm.
And I mean, T. Higgins isn't John Ross speed, but he got matched with a linebacker, so same result. Can throw it over the top. Then you have the pick six, and that didn't go well. But
One other play I really liked on that drive before the pick six was that dragon idea that I talked about before we started talking about this segment. They motioned Mixon out of the backfield, and the safety walks down over him, and then they just run a little slant. They get bail technique from Greg Newsome, or not Greg Newsome. Yeah, Greg Newsome. Anyway, the Northwestern corner rookie who is a pretty good player. And as soon as he opens his hips and Burrow sees that the safety goes with Mixon in motion to the flat, that's just a free slant. And there's nothing there to stop it. And the Bengals get what, 15-yard gain. And that's just, again, identifying based on a pre-snap read and pre-snap motion, some free yards.
Yep. And I mean, it really felt early that they were just ready for the Browns defense. They were marching up and down the field. You had that play, and then so you have the pick six, and we won't harp on it too much. I don't think anything was really open. I thought Denzel Ward just played the ball really, really well. But then you have the second drive, and this is where crack toss. They ran it twice, and they both worked really well. One was for a touchdown, and the other one was nice, I think a 10-yard gain to the right. And then the other one was a touchdown to the left, and they didn't even get fantastic blocking on the touchdown, but Mixon just does that little inside juke outside, and the cornerbacks grasping at air. I mean, yeah, he had the delay flat on the second drive. That was in there where Sample blocks this guy and then releases out on the boot, and it's an easy 15-yard gain, I think, to Sample. So
and let me ask you about that one, because this play, I also clipped this play last night. This play features jet motion from T. Higgins, which I think helps a lot. It gets the entire defense going left. Drew Sample on the play lined up at right tight end. He releases into that flat, as you point out. And this play isn't always successful. They've run this play action tight end flat a few times, and a lot of the times you'll see opposing teams sit on it. The Browns sat on it when they ran this play to CJ Uzama as well. But on this particular play with the jet motion and the route combination, looks like the Browns are playing off. There's nobody covering the flat. Is this something that works because the Browns are in a coverage that doesn't prioritize the flat, or is it the route combination that puts that corner in conflict, or what are your thoughts there?
My thoughts are the linebackers really, really fell for this one, and I think the reason is that the Bengals pulled, I believe it was Adeniji, from right to left. So when you're a linebacker, you're keying from the guards to the back. So you get the look of play action from the toss to the back, and then you get Adeniji as well pooling, and they don't really run a lot of that type of protection. So it plays on their own tendencies. Like I was saying, they don't really do that often. So the linebackers see that and they go sprinting over there. And then, like you said, they're playing off. They were in cover 3 on that play. So you have the one safety has to follow. Well, actually, there was nothing to hold him, but he just kind of drops back, kind of like a spot drop. I'm going to take away I mean, a lot of times when you run these boots, it's kind of like a flood concept, which means
Right.
you have deep route, intermediate, shallow. So he's like, okay, there's probably some type of crosser coming my way. So let me get in a good position to take that. And then basically at the line of scrimmage is Drew Sample just running that little delay flat.
Right.
So
And
a lot of,
Uzama did run a little bit of a corner on that route that helps. Another play that I want to point out is the Bengals got Jamar Chase against press man a little bit later. This doesn't result in a catch, but Burrow goes back shoulder. I thought he could have thrown it over the top. But the tendency here is Joe Burrow's reading that safety on Jamar Chase's side of the field, and Jamar Chase is isolated on the right side. They have trips on the left. As soon as that safety takes a step down, looking like he's trying to play robber a little bit, he triggers. And the ball's out to Chase, which is something that you're going to continue to see, I think, all year, because Joe Burrow's always going to take Jamar Chase in a vertical when he has a one-on-one opportunity. But that it wasn't all sunshine and roses. Obviously, that play falls incomplete. They had some issues as well on the defensive side of the ball, and we're going to talk about some of those explosive plays and what went wrong coming up next. Thanksgiving's coming up. And I'm excited for my version of a Thanksgiving feast. Even though I'm in Canada, I still try to prioritize American Thanksgiving and get myself a nice meal, all the good food, all the treats. And maybe you want a yummy dessert that isn't so full of calories and sugar. Well, Built Bar, we've told you about it all the time. It's the new holiday dessert. Get something delicious and feel good about it. Don't have a 300-calorie slice of pie. Well, or do. That's up to you. But if you don't want to have that 300-calorie slice of pie, Built Bar's just about 330 calories. 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, plenty of protein. There's a coconut cream pie Built Bar, a coconut Built Bar that can replace the coconut cream pie, a raspberry Built Bar that'll replace a raspberry pie, low in calories, low in carbs, low in fat, high in protein, covered in 100% real chocolate, and make sure you keep an eye on Built.com, the Built Bar website, for Black Friday specials. Use promo code LOCK15. When you check them out, you'll save 15% off your order. Again, that's LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. Mike, we've been positive after the Bengals got blown out against the Cleveland Browns because we got into the details of the first couple of drives of the game, and they were good. They were good. That being said, they had some issues. And let's start with everybody's favorite topic, run fits. The Browns are a team known with Bill Callahan to be well-versed in the wide zone, but this year, as well as last year, really, they run their fair share of gap plays. In fact, they run more man blocking than zone blocking this year, according to PFF charting. And it seemed like the Bengals got punched in the mouth a little bit when the Browns started running counter and they started running power. What went wrong?
So, when there's two ways to play counter, and we'll say that the main difference between power and counter for this exercise is that there's two poolers on counter, one pooler on power, essentially. So when it comes to counter, there's two ways to play it, and you could either spill or box. And the old way to play it is to box it, and that's what the Bengals do here. And the reason you're going to box it is because you're in single high, so your help's inside, so you're trying to funnel everything inside. The issue is, in my opinion, the issue is that you need everybody to be right. You need the end man on the line to perfectly same shoulder, same foot, gladiator technique, which is using the blocker as like a shield and think of his arm outside as like a sword. Keep that inside, kind of force that, cut down that hole. And I thought they actually did a pretty good job on that. It was Pratt a lot of the times. But then on the other hand, you need the three technique. He's got to have to do a better job of holding up the little combo double, because that was one issue, especially on the 70-yard touchdown. That was a power play, but still, he just bumps him right over a gap, and he's up on Wilson almost immediately. That was Wills that did that. And you need him to just stay strong in his gap. And when he goes to bump him, give him a lot of resistance, maybe grab him, but try not to get called for holding. It's a free 5 yards. I'd take it over 70, but and you need Wilson to scrape over top fast and recognize. And the way the Bengals played it, they had him head up with the center, not on the line of scrimmage, backed up, called a 0-0 type of technique for a linebacker. But that's a long way to go to get all the way over top of the tackle and into the hole. And then in the hole on the big touchdown was Jesse Bates trying to take on a puller, which is just what happens when you match 13 personnel with your nickel. So whatever. But the other way to play it is to spill it. Now, as we're getting into the weeds, your run fits are going to match your coverage. So you want to play quarters when you're going to spill. And this is something that happened way back in the 90s. Jimmy Johnson was the first person to start doing this. And he kind of killed, this is football history, he kind of killed the Joe Gibbs counter hog offense by spilling everything. And the reason it works so well is that you only need like one guy to be right. And then everybody else just needs to flow to the ball. Instead of same shoulder, same foot, taking on the blocker and trying to pound him and squeeze that hole down, he goes wrong. It's called wrong arm technique, the opposite way, where he just kind of cuts underneath the blocker. And usually when you're cutting underneath the first pooler, you end up messing up the second pooler. And now that whole thing's screwed up and they're trying to go outside because you went inside. And now you have time for your safeties to come down from over the top to try to make the stop. And it works really well, in my opinion. I think it works better than trying to box them. And I understand a little bit of why you want to play single high against the Browns, because they run a lot and you want guys in the box, but your safeties are in the box in this situation. They're kind of playing shallow quarters, and you just need to buy time so that they can come down and try to make a play. So that's a quick 5-minute explanation for what I think the Bengals should do next time they face the Browns, because I was fully expecting them to play man gap schemes, because that's what they did week 2 of last year. They were in wide zone, and then the bear front and DJ Reader were kind of taking that away. And then they switched to power counter, and those Wyatt Teller had a breakout game, and they just realized, hey, why don't we pool these big hogs to lead the way? Because they're really good at doing that.
Yeah. And on a number of occasions, there's a highlight reel of Wyatt Teller out there pancaking little dudes because the Browns somehow got Wyatt Teller matched up against Jesse Bates and Mike Hilton and Von Bell. And, there's one in there of Logan Wilson as well. And credit Wyatt Teller. He's a good player. He's a good puller, but it makes sense to me to make that job a little bit harder for the Browns if you can, and I know it's challenging. And to the Bengals' credit, later in the game, when the Browns were still running power to try to kill the game, when the game's really over at this point, and it's Dearness Johnson and not necessarily Nick Chubb, and I didn't notice if the Browns made any other substitutions, the Bengals did start to play against it a little bit better. But when you have Larry Ogunjobi getting through clean on a 70-yard touchdown run, missing a tackle in the backfield, you have Jesse Bates getting blown to smithereens by pulling Wyatt Teller, and Eli Apple coming down from the single high safety spot because you have an extra defensive back on the field, because Mike Hilton's on the field too, against 3 tight ends. That's not a good process. It won't always lead to a 70-yard touchdown. And maybe there's some tendency there, which is why the Bengals stayed in nickel against the 13 personnel. Maybe they're worried about those tight ends in the passing game, but it's something that certainly needs to get cleaned up. And quick question, just a yes or no maybe. Is this the same technique or the same problem they have with the Jets, or were the Jets not running the same sort of concepts offensively, and were the Bengals defending it differently?
No, I think the Jets, that game more came down to they kind of singled up. I don't want to throw him under the bus, but they kind of singled up the linebackers with the running back, and he just couldn't cover it.
Okay.
In the run game, I don't think it was nearly as bad. The only last thing I forgot to mention when talking about box versus spill is that they also like to play from that 3-4 look with 5 men on the line of scrimmage.
Right.
And that leads to a lot of the box, because you're going to play cover 3, cover 1 behind that. So when you want to spill it, you're going to get into like a 4-3, which they do against the Ravens. Same stuff here, even though they're using the quarterback run game. You got those guys flowing. You have 3 guys flowing behind it rather than 1 or 2. So I like doing that.
So maybe apply some principles from the Ravens power game against the Browns, which, given this game, makes a whole lot of sense. The challenge then, I guess, becomes for Lou Anarumo and his defensive front and the defensive front 7 is, well, how do you deal with now the wide zone? Because you can't sell out to stop the gap when these teams are more the Browns and the Ravens, when these teams are still well versed and well coached and can run the wide zone with a guy like Nick Chubb, who's very, very good, as we saw yesterday. And I also want to talk about the big play to Donovan Peoples-Jones when he gets behind Eli Apple, the quarters beater, but we'll do that coming up next, in addition to some individual matchups like Jonah Williams against Myles Garrett, how Hakeem Adeniji played in his first game, and did anyone else play well on defense? We'll get to that coming up next. And before we do that, just got to remind you about the Get Upside app. Everybody buys gas that has a vehicle, and if you have a vehicle and you're listening in your car, or we're the first podcast you listen to in the morning on your way to work, go ahead and save 25 cents for every gallon of gas every time you fill up using the Get Upside app. You can get it in the App Store or Google Play right now. We've got a promo code for you. For the first time you fill up, use promo code NFL. You're going to save an extra 25 cents per gallon on your first fill up. That's 50 cents cash back. No reason to pay full price at the pump when you can get money back for free using Get Upside. And everybody loves free money. You can cash out anytime. You can get it back to your bank account. You can get it in PayPal. You can get an e-gift card. Very, very flexible stuff. So go check out the free Get Upside app. Use promo code TOUCHDOWN. You're going to get 50 cents cash back on your first fill up. Again, that's touchdown for 50 cents back on your first fill up with the Get Upside app. All right, Mike, we went really long on the run fits, which is fine because, it's important. The Bengals are going to play the Browns again. They will have to deal with this again, and they will have to deal with this in the long term because I don't think Kevin Stefanski and Bill Callahan are going anywhere unless Brian manages to talk his dad into an early retirement. That said, let's talk about the quarters beater, which really was just a vertical with a crosser underneath. Jessie Bates in quarters. Obviously, you have 4 defensive backs responsible for a quarter of the field. Eli Apple manned up on Donovan Peoples-Jones. And if you're watching on YouTube, Sands is holding up a drawing here. You can see the right wide receivers running like a skinny post kind of thing, really a vertical with an inside lean. And they're running a crosser across the face of both of the safeties to try to occupy them. And Jessie Bates on this particular play did the right thing, Mike. He goes with the crosser. He's in very tight coverage, but Baker Mayfield is reading Von Bell. And as soon as Von Bell takes a step, and there's a good move. It's a little hezzy move from Donovan Peoples-Jones that gets Eli Apple and Von Bell to bite up a little bit. But as soon as he takes a step forward, whether it's because of that hezzy move or because of the crosser, Baker rips it to the vertical, and Eli Apple has no help inside that he's expecting. Credit Baker Mayfield for a good throw under pressure, but what needs to happen differently there?
And don't forget, I believe it was also play action, and when you're playing quarters, a lot of times your safeties are in the run fit, so that could also be a reason he came up a little bit.
To credit the safeties did not bite at all on the run fake on that a particular play.
Yeah. Like you mentioned, Jessie Bates does a fantastic job. The thing in quarters is that when you look at it just like this on YouTube, you could see that you just have a bunch of zones and stuff. You just think like, oh, well, why did Eli Apple or why wasn't Von Bell just deep? Because it's a bunch of rules. It's not so much of you're going to this area and just trying to watching. Sometimes you are.
You mean the NFL isn't like Madden where the players just go to the highlighted circles on the field? No, that can't be right.
Get into Nick Saban stuff, and it's way more complicated. But just for this exercise, yeah, it's when you get an inside release and a vertical, that means that side safety he has to stay over top because the cornerback is playing outside leverage, and most of the time they're either playing bail technique, which is susceptible a little bit to a deep shot like that, or they're walling it off and they see inside and they're like, okay, I have help to the inside. I can't give up like some type of out route, a corner, anything like that. So when Von Bell doesn't help him over the top, and it's a little bit on Eli Apple, you should hopefully be able to recover against somebody. I don't know. Maybe Donovan Peoples-Jones is really good, and he's just waiting for Odell to leave. But against
he's
a guy,
an insane athlete, so I guess you got to credit him for that.
Well, is Eli Apple a good athlete too? I don't know. He was drafted high.
Fair enough. I don't know. I'll check while you talk.
Okay, but you kind of hope that he can make the recovery speed and catch up to that, but really, it's kind of like a 50-50 blame and almost a little bit more towards Von Bell, in my opinion. Eli Apple got crushed on Twitter for that play because he's the guy that's running with him, but Von Bell doesn't stay over the top. He hardly even reacts to the vertical. It's a little bit of like a real skinny post or just an inside release go. Who knows? He gives a little bit of a move. Eli Apple doesn't catch up to Donovan Peoples-Jones, who's big, long, and fast, and he doesn't have help from Von Bell, who, by the rule, when that receiver over there goes inside release and vertical. You need to get over the top. Bates has that crosser. There's no need for him to stay with that crosser because of exactly what happens. Bates is perfectly covering the crosser. Eli Apple needs help, and Von Bell is nowhere to be found.
So just comparing 40 times, Eli Apple did run a 4.4. He had a pretty poor 10-yard split, to be fair. Donovan Peoples-Jones ran a 4.48. So in terms of 40 times, looks like Donovan Peoples-Jones is slower than Eli Apple. But again, there was that little double move, that little hezzy move that Apple bid on a little bit, and that creates enough separation. It was that Donovan Peoples-Jones can jump out of a building, like a 140-inch broad jump, 44-inch vertical. So
He's
really
explosive.
crazy numbers there. The explosiveness, yeah. And that's probably what it is, right? You give that hezzy move, you get out of the break, and use your explosiveness to get out of the break quickly. And, when you get the additional help of the eye candy holding up Von Bell, tough job for Eli Apple there, and also credit Baker Mayfield. I yesterday on the podcast on the post-game show was a little bit like, Baker didn't really do anything. He had some easy plays and didn't have to do much. That was a great throw. He was really good under pressure in that game. He got hit as he threw a couple times and delivered absolute seeds on that play on the Njoku touchdown pass. So, got to credit Baker a little bit, unfortunately, and for some reason these seem to only happen against the Bengals.
It's always the get right game for him. Yeah, that quarter's is supposed to be like a bracket almost on him, but it ends up when you don't bracket, that ends up to being a busted coverage.
So we're not going to talk about the fact that Joe Burrow went 0 for 7 targeting 20 plus yards downfield. One of those is a stone cold Jamar Chase drop. The other one is a debatable Jamar Chase drop. There's a T Higgins debatable drop. There's maybe slightly misthrown ball on the run, a 50-yard post to Jamar Chase. We're not going to talk about those. Although you could. We won't. Myles Garrett against Jonah Williams. Let's finish on a couple positive notes here. I thought Jonah, he did give up a sack, and maybe you vertical set it. Maybe you just give him some help. But he had been handling Myles Garrett pretty well for a lot of the game. And you went through and clipped a bunch of these plays. And you seem to be pretty encouraged with how Jonah Williams played against probably the best edge rusher in the NFL, maybe at least top 2.
Yeah, for my money, best edge rusher in the NFL, especially pass rushing. And yeah, the thing that's impressive to me is that he wasn't getting some win off of Myles Garrett just not giving full effort or anything like that. It's that he's playing with patience and he's not freaking out. He's on an island with the best edge rusher in the league in a wide 9 technique that knows he's pass rushing, and he sets. Myles Garrett waits on the first play. I'm thinking of Myles Garrett's waiting for him to throw out his hands because he wants to swipe and get around the outside, and he just keeps waiting. They're playing the waiting game, and Myles Garrett throws out his swipe first, and Jonah's able to lock him up after that. And then there's another play where Garrett tries to bull rush him because everybody was trying to say that Jonah Williams doesn't have the anchor to take on guys like that, and he does. He takes on that. It's the long arm a little bit that gives him some trouble sometimes with his shorter reach, but he takes on a 2-handed bull rush, and then Garrett tries to counter inside, and he stays with that and forces him, just pushes him up in the pocket, gives Burrow space. And these are all, I think he might have had a chip from Joe Mixon on one of these, which accounts for a little bit. You can't go sprinting around the outside on that one play, but I mean, it's not like real help from an offensive lineman or anything. So he's on the island a third time with him. And this time, I think, was the play he got help because Garrett tries to make a little spin move inside, and he's just mirroring him inside to outside, keeping up with the lateral agility of Myles Garrett. And all of this is just the process is there that Jonah Williams just having a fantastic game against the best edge rusher in the league. And then Myles Garrett just has alien levels of get off and bend to go completely flat 90-degree turn and get a sack and a pressure. Those were the 2 clear losses I had for Williams. So other than those 2 plays, and you kind of take that against somebody like Myles Garrett. I mean, Laramie Tunsil last year got beat by him for a sack. I think it might have been a strip sack. It just happens. But other than that, fantastic job.
Myles Garrett is getting his against pretty much everyone he plays, and you take that from Jonah Williams. And really, the offensive line protection on the whole was pretty good early. And then things get away from them, and they're a drop back passing team, and nobody's going to hold up against the Browns for long if you're straight drop back passing their defense is built to beat you when the Browns have a lead, and they got a lead early. Generally, the Browns built to beat you when they have a lead. Before we wrap up, let's talk Hakeem Adeniji and Germaine Pratt. Hakeem Adeniji, according to Zach Taylor, is going to get another opportunity to start coming out of the bye. A surprise to some. Didn't have great marks from PFF. Jackson Carman, the second round pick, apparently, if he's healthy, and I guess we're not entirely clear on that, maybe he's still laboring, has lost his job to the Bengals sixth-round pick from 2020. And the coaches, to be fair, were very high on Hakeem Adeniji in the preseason before he had his pec injury, but just 1 week, well, I guess technically 3 weeks of practice. They use the entire period with Adeniji, I believe, but 1 week on the active roster and Adeniji takes his job. What did you see from Hakeem Adeniji in this game?
Well, there's definitely some rust, and that I think attributes to the poor PFF grade. There's a play where he jump sets and he gets kind of shook a little bit by the defensive tackle. He gets him initially, but then the defensive tackle is a little fake inside, and then he gets beaten on that play. If you wanted to watch it, Riley Reef absolutely pancakes Jadeveon Clowney, so I thought that was awesome.
That was the 50-yard throw on the run for Joe Burrow.
Missed.
Yeah, couple feet off. Anyway, continue.
Other than that, though, Jackson Carman always seemed to have a problem with his hand placement and his balance and things like that. I didn't see so much of a process problem with Hakeem Adeniji. Like, there's obviously a little bit of issue where I talk about Jonah Williams being calm, and I don't think Hakeem Adeniji was the same way. I think you could tell he was making his first start and all year, and there's rust there, and he's probably a little bit nervous, so he's kind of a little bit more jittery. So you got to work that out, but I think that comes with time. He just has to do a better job of knowing what the pass rusher wants to do to him. And then other than that, though, his hand placement's actually pretty good. They jump set him a lot, and they did that last year too. So that's weird, but I mean, if it works, okay. Overall, I think it's tight, but I think Hakeem Adeniji was slightly better process-wise than Jackson Carman, so I understand the decision.
Not the worst problem to have. A couple of young guys competing, hopefully making each other a little bit better. Let's finish up with Germaine Pratt, one of the only Bengals who tackled against the Browns. And generally, I've talked about his grip strength on this podcast before. When he gets his hands on guys, he's really good at not letting go. But I thought Germaine Pratt had a pretty nice game. He stood out a few times for just doing his job in the run game. And we talked about the box technique, or the box, I don't know if technique is the right word, the box method of containing power or counter. And he did his job on those plays a few times when he was asked to set the edge, and there was nobody inside to help. What else did you see from Germaine Pratt in this one?
Yeah, gladiator technique. It's a cool name. You got to use it.
I was more talking about the idea, like the defensive concept. Yeah.
Boxing counter. It's all good. Tackling was good. He had a few plays in the flat against tight ends, and then one play they had Jarvis Landry in the backfield, and they threw a little flat or a swing pass to him, and he makes a stop right at the line of scrimmage. He did his job tackling, and like you said, grip strength is there. Me and you, I think, have both talked about, like, he's got vice grip arms.
Yeah.
Most guys don't get away from that, so that's cool. But yeah, the coverage. I think his coverage has been underrated all year. And then this game, PFF starts to really took notice, and they gave him, I think, an 80 something. But that's kind of what I've seen all year. And this game specifically, he just does a good job of, when he's asked to cover a tight end across the formation. There's one play where they tried to sneak, I believe it was Austin Hooper, across the field, and the end play ends up blowing itself up because he takes that. He doesn't fall for the play action. He jams Hooper at the line, and then he just follows him the rest of the way because he's a good athlete. I think people forget that he was a safety. There was a play against the Steelers where he did robot technique, and he ran stride for stride with Chase Claypool on the over route. So he's having a career year still. I think Logan Wilson's – I think he's going to come back around. I think he's a type of player that has these spike games and then these lower games. But Pratt's been kind of consistently pretty good, and this game was another example of him. He does his job. He'll probably have to play a little bit more now that Akeem Davis-Gaither's hurt. So excited to see that. I thought he was probably top 2 defenders of the game with DJ Reader, and that was that impressive performance. Just a good job of rallying and tackling when he had to, and man coverage when he had to, and then gladiator technique and making tackles, all that stuff. It was awesome to watch.
And unfortunately, we didn't get to talk about DJ Reader because the Browns mostly just stopped trying to run inside at some point. DJ Reader is very consistent. The guy's good at football. He's good at his job, and very happy that we get to watch him every week. Unfortunately, not a whole lot to talk about with him in terms of impact plays in this game, but we're gonna wrap up there. That's our film review. We're done with 9 games of film review. It is the bye week, of course. We have a surprise guest coming tomorrow. So if you've stuck with us for this 35-minute episode, you're going to definitely want to tune in tomorrow. We've got a very fun surprise for everybody. And then later this week, we've got Joe Goodberry for his mid-season thoughts and more bye week content as we continue to plan our episodes. Until next time, Bengals fans, hoo day and have a good one.